Africa is not just a continent. It is an entire universe, about which most people know surprisingly little. From the first pages of geography textbooks, we are forced to accept a distorted idea of its size and importance. But if school maps reflected the real picture, it would become obvious. Africa is much larger than you think. Let's start with the numbers. The area of Africa is about 30 million square kilometers. This is larger than the area of the United States, China, India, Japan, and all of Europe combined. But on most maps, especially on the Mercator projection, the continent looks smaller, and this is no coincidence. Geographers admit that such maps distort the size of countries in favor of Europe and North America. On a real map, you can fit India, China, the United States, Eastern and Western Europe into Africa, and there will still be room left over. And here's the paradox. With such a size, Africa is still the least studied continent in geological terms. Under its surface are gigantic riches that can turn the world economy upside down. In the last few decades alone, deposits of rare earth metals, gold, diamonds, oil, and natural gas have been discovered in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Botswana, Namibia, and Angola. For example, cobalt, a key component of batteries for electric vehicles and smartphones, is 70% mined in Africa, in the same Congo. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Geologists say that most of the continent's subsoil has not yet been explored due to a lack of infrastructure and political instability. In 2022, deposits of uranium and lithium, needed for nuclear energy and batteries, were discovered in the Sahel. Rare minerals for lasers and satellites are found in Ethiopia. Graphene shale, a source of the material of the future, has been found in Tanzania. Africa is literally stuffed with high-tech components. Now imagine, in Central Africa, in the Congo River Basin, there is the second largest tropical ecosystem on the planet after the Amazon. Under this green ocean, in areas where no scientist has ever set foot, there may be not only biological secrets, but also deposits of gas, oil, and rare minerals. In 2023, an international expedition, partly funded by NASA, began exploring magnetic anomalies in this region. The results are still classified, but preliminary data show that structures similar to giant underground cavities have been discovered, possibly with signs of unknown geological activity. In addition to natural resources, one should not forget about the unique geology. The East African Rift Valley is a fault more than 6,000 kilometers long, passing through Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique. Scientists suggest that this is where a new ocean is being born. In this region, the Earth's crust is literally splitting, and over time, in millions of years, Africa will split into two continents. Scientific stations record weak earthquakes and magma rises in this area every week. But even this is not the most surprising thing. Satellite geology has shown that under the Sahara Desert there is a huge ancient aquifer, one of the largest in the world. According to calculations, more than 150,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water are hidden there. This information was hushed up for a long time, but now the largest powers are taking a closer look at it. China is already investing billions in countries located above this reservoir. Even the history of Africa is full of mysteries. In Mali, in the ancient city of Timbuktu, manuscripts from the 10th to 14th centuries were found, which describe stars unknown to Europe at that time, and also mention a round Earth, 500 years before Magellan. In Zimbabwe, there are the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, a megalithic complex built in the 11th to 14th centuries without the use of cement, with perfectly fitted stones weighing up to 7 tons. Who did this is still unknown. Africa is the key to the future, hidden in the past and present. It is a 21st century energy storehouse, a biological laboratory, a historical treasure trove, and a geopolitical chessboard. Yet despite all this, it remains undervalued. It may be the last place on the planet where something truly grandiose can still be discovered. When we talk about Africa as the continent of the future, it is important to understand not only its geographic and resource power, but also its growing influence on global processes. Modern superpowers have long understood this. China, the United States, Russia, France, Turkey, and India compete for access to African resources, territories, and political alliances. Africa is no longer perceived as a zone of humanitarian aid. It is a strategic asset of global scale. China has become Africa's largest foreign trade partner since 2009. It has built more than 10,000 infrastructure facilities in the continent's countries, from power plants to ports, railways, and universities. In exchange, it receives long-term access to deposits of oil, copper, iron, cobalt, and lithium. Chinese satellites monitor geological anomalies in Mozambique and Zambia, which, according to unconfirmed data, may contain hidden deposits of green metals, key elements for the energy transition. The United States and its allies, in turn, are increasing their military presence in Africa. According to the RAND Corporation, there are more than 30 American military installations on the continent, including intelligence, drone, and special forces bases. The goal is to control potential conflicts and protect interests in strategically important regions such as the Horn of Africa and the western coast of the Gulf of Guinea, areas with the richest oil and gas reserves. Of particular interest is the so-called African Lithium Belt, a region covering parts of Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. It was here, in 2021, that one of the largest lithium veins in the world was found. And while the world's attention is focused on Bolivia and Chile, Africa is becoming a new hub for the production of batteries for electric vehicles. The European Union is already concluding agreements on the direct import of African lithium and rare earth elements in order to avoid dependence on Chinese exports. But Africa is interesting not only as a resource appendage. It is the cradle of humanity. Remains of the earliest hominids, including the famous Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis, were found in Ethiopia and Kenya, dating back about 3 million years. Recent discoveries in caves in South Africa, for example, in the Rising Star System, have cast doubt on the linear model of evolution. There, hominid skulls were found that had primitive anatomy, but at the same time showed signs of ritual burial. This may mean that human intelligence appeared earlier than is commonly believed. Another phenomenal fact is that, according to the latest data, there may be a continent under the ice of East Antarctica that was once connected to the southern part of Africa. Geologists suggest that part of South Africa lies on the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. This may explain the strange magnetic anomalies and high concentrations of platinum, palladium, and other rare metals in the Bushveld Plateau. By the way, South Africa owns about 90% of the world's platinum reserves. It is impossible not to mention mysterious natural anomalies. In Gabon, there is a natural nuclear reactor, a unique phenomenon discovered in 1972. In the Oklo uranium deposit, a zone was found where uranium-235 spontaneously entered into a chain reaction millions of years ago. This is proof that nuclear reactions can occur in natural conditions, and perhaps occur in other parts of the planet. Scientists from France and Japan are conducting new studies of similar structures in Mali and Chad. And now a little about the water system. The Congo River is the second most powerful after the Amazon and the only one in the world that crosses the equator twice. Its depth in some places reaches more than 220 meters. This is the deepest river on the planet. Its hydroelectric potential is practically not used. If the dam system according to the Grand Inga Plan was built, then only one country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, could supply electricity to half of Africa. Moreover, part of the energy could be exported to Europe. And another little-known fact, according to the latest satellite observations, under the sands of the Nubian Desert, there is a geological structure resembling an ancient meteorite crater with a diameter of more than 30 kilometers. Some scientists suggest that it could have been a source of rare isotopes and minerals, and also influenced the formation of underground water systems in the region. Even the African sky holds secrets. Namibia and South Africa are home to the largest astronomical complexes in the Southern Hemisphere, such as the HESS telescope and the SKA Observatory, a project in development, which will be used to study deep space. It is here that the best conditions for observing galaxies in the infrared range, as well as for recording gravitational waves. Africa is a giant living organism in which ancient history, geological secrets, political intrigue, and future technologies merge. And the most amazing thing is that we still know too little about it. Africa is not only a continent of astonishing size and natural contrasts, but also a geopolitical arena with a deeply rooted legacy of colonialism that continues to this day. To understand Africa's hidden power, one must look into its political, economic, and even psychological makeup. One of the most intriguing aspects is how global superpowers literally compete for influence on the African continent, not always openly, but almost always with a long-term view. The United States, China, Russia, France, Turkey, India, all have established themselves here in one form or another, each with their own interests, projects, and strategies. China, for example, is building roads, bridges, airports, factories, and even bases, turning infrastructure aid into an instrument of control. The Belt and Road Initiative covers much of Eastern and Southern Africa. But at the same time, debt dependence is growing. When a state is unable to repay a loan, it hands over assets to China. Thus, strategic ports, railways, and mines are coming under Chinese control. This is not just investment, but quiet geopolitical expansion. China is also actively developing satellite infrastructure and cyber networks, controlling information flows. Russia uses a different tactic, military presence, including through private military companies, such as the Wagner PMC or its successors, which operate in the Central African Republic, Mali, Sudan, and other countries. Officially, they help fight terrorism and protect regimes. Unofficially, they ensure the loyalty of regimes and receive licenses for gold, uranium, and diamond mining in exchange. In this case, Africa becomes an arena of gray geopolitics. But the continent itself is also beginning to realize its strength. The African Union is increasingly working to integrate the continent. A free trade zone is being created, which should unite 54 states and 1.4 billion people. This will become the largest economic bloc in the world in terms of the number of participants. A single currency, single rules, single logistics. Such projects are still in their infancy, but are already becoming a reality. For the first time in decades, African states are beginning to speak not only the language of national interests, but also the language of a common future. However, internal conflicts are hindering integration. The African continent is home to 16 of the 20 most unstable states in the world. Wars, coups, terrorist groups, corruption, separatism, all this slows down development. But even the most destroyed countries hide riches that international players are ready to fight for. An example is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It has the world's largest deposits of coltan, a mineral needed to produce smartphones and other electronics. But because of wars and unrest, mining is illegal, accompanied by violence, and exploits child labor. Militants, corporations, and intelligence services are fighting for control of these mines. It is also interesting that African countries are beginning to build up their technological potential. Nigeria and Kenya are becoming startup hubs. Rwanda has an e-government that is considered one of the most digital in the world. Uganda is developing biotechnology, and South Africa is producing innovative medical products. African universities are reaching the global level, and African IT schools are training thousands of programmers. What seemed impossible 10 years ago is now becoming the norm. There is another little-known fact. Africa is actively participating in the space race. Egypt, Algeria, South Africa, Nigeria, and other countries have their own satellites, launched with the help of China, India, and France. Remote sensing, geonavigation, climate monitoring, and agriculture programs are being developed. The South African SKA Observatory will become the largest radio telescope in the world. Thanks to this, Africa will receive colossal arrays of data, which will create opportunities for new breakthroughs in science. African religions and esotericism are worth mentioning. The continent is the cradle of spiritual practices, many of which are still hidden from the outside world. Some tribes keep knowledge about herbs that are found nowhere else on Earth. In Uganda, Tanzania, Botswana, there are secret societies that consider themselves the keepers of ancient knowledge, transmitted exclusively orally. Water cults, astronomical rituals, animal mysticism, knowledge of the Earth's lifeline. All this is not fiction, but documented phenomena that arouse the interest of scientists. Africa, then, is not just a geographical space. It is a continent of mystery, of the future, of hidden power. It is where the interests of world powers collide, where their own power awakens, where knowledge is stored that can change humanity's view of history, resources, religion, and even of itself. So why does Africa remain a sleeping superpower? Perhaps because too many forces are interested in it never waking up. But history knows many examples of continents considered weak suddenly becoming epicenters of change. Perhaps Africa is the next such case. It is not for nothing that they say that whoever controls Africa controls the future.